us together to thank James Gray and the team for the fabulous service we've had this evening. So it is a real honour to be here this evening on this very special, I'm not sure, is it an anniversary or a birthday? I'm not quite sure. But anyway, I was really taken when Albert Fraser contacted me, and he actually contacted me 3 years ago, before Michel Barnier was even thought of. It's quite extraordinary. I've never actually been asked, what are you doing on the 9th of November 2019 when this is 2016? I have no idea what I'm going to be doing next week, never mind in 3 years' time. But it was really very much the opportunity to secure the date, and I understand today is to the day 100 years, which I think is remarkable. The fact that it falls on a Saturday, fantastic. The fact that we could actually get here in the Markliff, even better. The fact that it's a palindrome. You all know what a palindrome is? Yeah? Yeah, 9, 11, 19. Backwards, 9, 11, 19. So it's a very, very special day. So a real honour. And so I was doing a little bit of assessment as to why Albert had phoned me and contacted me to ask me to say a few words after dinner. And first of all, I thought, as he was implying, I thought it's maybe because my father was district commissioner when I was a scout, and quite a few of you will know him, Bill Monagh. And I thought there would be quite a neat sort of double generational connection there. So I thought that might be one reason why he asked me to say a few words. And then I thought, well, maybe if it's not that, there's maybe age. So I'm a couple of clicks away from 70, and it is actually slightly, maybe they're being quite sensible by getting somebody who's actually quite old, because with age, your memory fades or maybe exaggerates, and maybe all the sort of the rather dodgy things that went on in the Scout Hut might not quite be remembered, and that old adage, what goes on in the Scout Hut stays in the Scout Hut. And then I suddenly realised why he'd invited me. It dawned on me, because as you can see, I'm exactly the same size as I was when I was a 15-year-old scout. And I have to say, it was a real shame that we all got that email that told us what to wear. Because I was actually going to get my shorts on, you wobble, but I can still get into it. Brilliant. And so that is, I'm sure, the reason why I'm here. So it's very kind, Ian, of saying these very generous words, and so you understand the sort of my sort of career. I did 21 years in the army. Started in Paris. Finished off in commanding a tank regiment. Obviously, you need little people for that. Then I went into 21 years. I did everything in 21 years. 21 years in business. Started in sort of London, finished off in Johannesburg. And now I'm doing 21 years, what they call a plural career, a portfolio career. In other words, I work for a number of companies as a non-executive, and that takes me from the UK, South Africa, Japan, etc. So it's a fabulous thing, and actually 21 years, and this final 21 year slot will take me up to 83, which is slightly worrying. But so that's my career, and the reason for mentioning that is that there's a golden thread that runs through my career, and that's leadership. And when I was just reflecting on my own personal sort of leadership journey, one might assume that you start my leadership journey in the army, because that's where you do all the leadership. But actually, for me, the leadership journey, my personal leadership journey, started in the Scout Hut. And it is quite extraordinary how, particularly I'm looking here at a number of guys who are, were there today, and you learn from the people around you. So I picked up, and leadership's all about plagiarism, if we'll be honest. Things that work, I'm going to go seriously, but things that work quite well for you, and you feel quite good about it, you tuck away. And for me, the leaders that taught me the early formative leadership skills were people like Alan Guthrie, people like Ronnie Scott Brown, who was here earlier, and I'm sure nowadays it's Ryan and the rest of you, Chris and Marianne. So it is just that whole thing about leadership. And also, it gave me the opportunity of practicing leadership. You know, in the Cubs it was a sixer, and then as a patrol leader. And so it's that whole thing of leadership actually started for me, not in the army, but in the Scout Hut. And that, to me, is a really, really important aspect of it. And arguably it's actually quite worrying, because there was only 4 short years between me leaving as a 15-year-old scout and leading 30 paratroopers in West Belfast. And that's actually quite scary. No idea how the Good Friday Agreement managed to survive, and I'm not quite sure about the IRA. If only the IRA actually knew that there was only 4 short years between me doing dib, dib, dib and fire, fire, fire. But that is that. So it is actually slightly worrying, but also I'm going to just emphasize this whole thing about the fact that in these short years, as a scout, as a cub before that, really, really important. And the things that you're picking up from the guys left and right of you, your peer group, but also indeed the leaders there. And then there's a definition of leadership which says leadership is all about getting somebody to do something they don't want to do and getting them to do it willingly. And I'm sure that will resonate with the guys who are now doing scout leadership at the moment, or who are doing patrol leader. Getting somebody to do something they don't want to do and getting them to do it willingly. And that's actually, I think, fundamental to leadership as we, as we go through life. So and it's interesting that in my current role, either in business or in my own company, which is a leadership development company, I talk about success and how can we actually get organizations to be successful, individuals to be successful. And the definitions that I use for success in an organization, I've always said there's only 2 things. People say, well, it's fantastic, there's only 2 things we've got to think about to be successful. And the successful thing for an organization is to know the direction you're heading and then to be able to execute impeccably. A lot of guys and a lot of businesses have fantastic strategies, but they can't execute. Or they can execute, but they don't have a great strategy. So that's an organization. When it comes to individuals, I say there's, again, only 2 things you have to worry about. And that's preparation and luck. And when you take that apart and realize actually preparation and luck, one you've got control over, the other you don't. But the preparation bit is absolutely fundamental. And it is interesting, when I was thinking about what would be my underlying theme for this evening, it occurred to me that I keep on talking about preparation and luck, that twinning of these 2 elements. And actually preparation and being prepared is an underlying motto in the Scouts. And so not only was I learning leadership as a skill subliminally when I was in the Scout Hut, but I was also learning the great mantra about success, which is all about preparation. And I think if you just lock that away, and all the things that we do as Scouts, and before that, Cubs and Beavers, it's all about being prepared. And if that is one of the 2 elements over which you've got control, and the more you prepare, the less you have to rely on the luck, then that, I think, is the route to success. But it's interesting as well, when we look at age, and it's fine and dandy me being up here, and it's actually, I think it's brilliant the fact we've got this age profile, and Ian, you were running through the bell curve, I think, is slightly skewed towards the older element. I think you would agree. Would you agree? Yeah. And they started, what was the decade you started? Was it the 40s or 50s? The decade, yeah? 50s. I mean, that's a long time ago. And it was brilliant for me going down to the Scout. It was the first time being in the Scout Hut in 50 odd years. And it was just, it hasn't changed. The losers are better. Is that right? Turn it up, but it was just, you know, it is the age thing, and it is just a little bit of a skew. And I've always said, you know, age is, it is interesting how, you know, as you get older, you know, you reflect back, and I'm sure if we've used the word, do you remember, once tonight or today, you've used it a million times. But I've always said, you know, it is quite interesting, the old sort of, you know, when you're in your 20s, I've always said, when you're in your 20s, your heart rules your head. When you're in your 40s, your head rules your heart. And when you're like me and you're in your 60s, your bladder rules both. That's why I've been up and down and across it. And I've been drinking water. I had no wine. I can't wait to have a glass of wine. But it is important. It is really nice to have that sort of fabulous, you know, sort of cross section of young and old together. I've always actually said that there is actually more in common between the young and the old. Because I've always said neither have proper jobs and they're both in drugs. Anyway, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But it's also a little thing like, I was going to, what was it, the Athol Hotel, I think it was, or one of the hotels, because yeah, the Athol, and talking about happy hour. As you get older, happy hour is having a nap after lunch. How things have changed. Anyway, the bottom line I've always said with age is, and I've always said this, age and treachery will always triumph over youth and ability. So bad luck, guys. You've got to be old to be able to be, and to be treacherous. Anyway, going back to my sort of definition of success and everything else, and the preparation bit, really important to understand that actually preparation is fundamental. Certainly in the military, as you can imagine, whether on training or on operations, the more you prepare, the more successful it will be, and it's absolutely critical. In business, totally, preparation, and there's been an enormous amount, all the businesses that I'm involved with, particularly with Brexit, the more you prepare, the more that you can actually counter anything that's going to come over the gunnels at you. But fundamentally, the preparation, for me, doing the stuff that Ian was kind of to mention, in other words, where you're out of your comfort zone, when you're doing a challenge, and where you're entering the world of the unknown, that really is where preparation comes into it. And it is interesting that the thing that I'm about to do in a few days' time, the heavy lifting to get to the start line has been far greater than any of the other things that I've done. So whether it's going to the North Pole, the South Pole, the Everest, the Sahara, or whatever it is, this thing that I'm about to do has taken an enormous amount of energy and preparation, because we're entering into this complete unknown. And just to paint the picture of what we're doing, we are going down in literally 3 weeks today, down to the Canaries, and essentially we're going to row from the Canaries to Antigua. So there's a place called La Gomera, which is just south of Tenerife, and we will go across to Antigua. Essentially, it's fairly straightforward, so it doesn't take too much brain power. You do 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 24 hours a day, and it will take us a couple of months. So the... But it is quite interesting because of the preparation involved. As I say, I'd rather talk about this because I haven't done this yet, and so I can genuinely talk about preparation. But it is so reasonably daunting, and it's when I was thinking about what I was going to say tonight, I suddenly realised that actually all the stuff that I'm about to do and that I'm preparing for, actually I was doing 50 odd years ago in the Scouts. And I mean, just to give you a sniff of what I mean by that, this is almost a circle of life. It's a very, very prophetic. But basically, if you think about, well, first of all, in the Scout Hut, how many of you managed to get to the Scout Hut? Do a show of hands? Actually, a very large number of you. Fantastic. The first thing that struck me was, if you notice the mirror dinghy in the corner, there were 4 of us who put this mirror dinghy together. I mean, the practical things came from people like Duncan and Albert and Gordon and myself involved in putting that. So that dinghy, mirror dinghy, is, oh, it must be 53, 54 years old. I wouldn't necessarily trust it. But isn't it worrying? Why are you singing it tomorrow? Oh, you're not singing it tomorrow. But
you want to take it with you?
Yes, well, actually, that's the first thing. This circle of life, this parallel universe, is this whole thing about suddenly in the Scouts, I got myself sort of connected with the sea, built a boat, and if you scale it up, there's going to be 4 of us in our boat, so scale a mirror dinghy up, exactly the same. So bizarrely, I got this sort of the feel for an open vessel in the sea in the Scouts, and I'm about 50 odd years later to do exactly the same, voluntarily. So that's the first parallel. Another parallel is actually being out in the open. Again, the first time I really got out into the open and got to face the environment and nature and everything else, and all those sort of elements that are thrown at you, was in the Scouts. And I remember there's an occasion with Duncan. Duncan, I'm sure you will remember, I can't remember who was with us, but we'd be aged 13 or 14, the old rucksack in the back, into the Cairngorms, and it was August. And we said, be prepared, back to the preparation. So we said, midges, August, bound to be there. So bizarrely, aged 13 or 14, we came up with the plan to spoil, or to get rid of the midges. And we both had pipes. And we bought a kilogram of Old Holborn. It's bizarre. This whole concept is bizarre. And so but the theory was, be prepared, get in your tent, looking like a mini Harold Wilson, and then the midges would disappear. The theory, great in theory, practice, no. Didn't work. I mean, we coughs and spluttered, age 13, 14, with Old Holborn, coughs and spluttered, and there are certain things you remember. But this was me sort of facing off against the environment for the first time. And we were packed up our kit, we cut the tent and everything else, and we're walking down down the side of a field, and a farmer was coming towards us. And so this was us, feeling like the bee's knees, and speaking about knees, it was Duncan, and you could see the farmer sort of eyeing us up and looking at all the midge bites. And he said, the last time I saw legs like that, we had the whole herd put down. But anyway, but exactly the same. So the stuff that I learned in the Scouts, exactly the same in that I'm going to be, feeling the elements and everything else in 3 weeks' time. So this is really this circle of really preparing yourself. Exactly the same in the same. You've been to all the camps and everything else, and if you're hiking, you have the camping gas stoves. You use jet boils now, or camping gas stoves. Yeah, camping gas stoves. So, camping gas stoves, fantastic, exactly the same in our boat. So I learned the skill of not quite the old barbecue sausages and kumbaya in 3 weeks' time, but almost. So we are eating, we've got one little camping gas stove to last us for 2 months, 4 of us. And actually, it's all dehydrated food. So just so you're aware, we make our own water. We use solar panels off the boat, make our own water, and with the water that we make, desalinate it. You then rehydrate the food, and off you go. 60 days. But again, all learned from the Scouts. This whole thing about this notion about standing there or sitting there with your barbecue sausage, with your camping gas stove and everything else, 50 odd years later, doing exactly the same. The circle of life. Very, very scary. If you're thinking, the other thing I was thinking about, the loo. Now, every old, when you're climbing Everest or whatever, why is it? You go to a party and people say, but how do you go to the loo when you're 8,000 meters up? And it's minus whatever. So everything gravitates back to the loo. I remember in the Scouts, the first time you go to the loo, it's actually, presumably you've been through all of it. I mean, do you have sort of, you live behind the bush?
Much more modern day toilets nowadays.
So behind the bush. In the car.
He's
The market garden. Anyway, so, but it is interesting, and it's overcoming these inhibitions. And we've actually got one guy on the boat, I'll come on to the guys in a minute, one guy on the boat who's never gone to the loo in public. You know, guys here, when there's another person standing here. But of course, those people who've been to the Scouts are used to that. I know it sounds, how we overcome it on the boat, and actually we've done some training, although I only rowed from May this year. In fact, 3 of us have never rowed before, so that adds a little bit of a complication. I hope the other person who can rows fast. But so how we overcome the loo thing is, you know, we have a little bit of Cockney slang. So we've come into the sort of the 21st century. So you say, I'm going for a Donald. And you say, Donald Trump. You understand it. So it just gets a little bit of humour and everything else, and it also relays to the other guy, actually, look up, avert your eyes. He's going for a Donald. But actually, the other end of the little camping gas stove is a bucket, and it's the bucket and jacket routine. So just in case you're wondering how much you go to the loo, so there's literally a tiny little bucket. Only a couple of months, should be fine. We do empty it, by the way. Good point out. So that is very is quite an interesting little circle of life, a parallel between Scouts and what I'm going to be doing shortly. Uniform. Again, I'm missing your uniform right at the start. Again, you in the Scouts, you equip yourself, you have clothing and so forth, depending on the environment and such like. Exactly the same in the boat. But in case you didn't realise, when you're rowing the Atlantic, you row naked. Yeah, that was actually the attraction. Not for me, not for the other 3. But no, you row naked. Only because of the chafing, the salt, and everything else. You don't quite start naked, because La Gomera and the people in La Gomera in the holiday resort might throw something at you. But and you don't arrive naked into Antigua, because again, the holidaymakers might spill the gin and tonics. But in between, generally speaking, you row naked because it just stops the shave. Nowhere to put your badges, sadly. But otherwise, it's minimalist. Less is more is a great cry. Blisters as well. Again, Scouts. First time I ever had blisters in the Scouts, and now, funny enough, we don't get blisters on our feet. We get blisters on our hands. And here's me, nearly 70, I'm going to get blisters on my bottom. To wait nearly 70 years for that to be an achievement, to have a big tick, is quite something. But it is interesting how, again, the whole pain that you get when you hike and you get blisters, exactly the same 50 odd years on, and you have callous hands, blistered hands, and callous and blistered bottom. Just to add a little bit of technicolor to that whole thing. And then the final thing is age. And it is interesting how, in the Scouts, you're doing things, you're going through your sort of personal journey of life, and you're doing things for the first time. Because it was, you were young. Here we're doing things, and sadly, it is very sad, we're setting ourselves as being the oldest. So our team name is the Ancient Mariners. Of the 4 of us, the youngest is a mere 61. I'm the oldest, and the others are in between me and the 61. Our boat is called the Grey Escape. Quite good fun. Because actually this year is the 75th anniversary of the Great Escape, so it's called the Grey Escape. And if we crack this, if we get to the other end, then we will actually set our new world record for being the oldest 4-man crew to row any ocean. And we'll actually smash it by about 33 years. Had I known that, if I'd done my son better, then I would have actually got one 32-year-old in the boat, and we'd have still beaten the record. But anyway, so that then just leads on to the final little bit of the connection, the circle of life, which is all about people. And it's great to get that sort of the banter, and Ian and I were just talking about the noise level in here for the last sort of 3 or plus hours has just been fantastic. It's just brilliant how there's just a whole buzz at tables, across tables, people getting up and and corresponding and chatting to everybody else, people that you haven't seen for all these years. I think it's brilliant. But people is so, so important. And I found that whether in business, in the military, in scouts, or dare I say it, on any expedition, getting the right people around you is fundamental. And the guys that we've got on the boat, just so you're aware, one guy, a fellow called John, he is a person with whom I've done lots of expeditions with. I've done Everest, I've done the Falls and everything else with him. Really nice guy, and the great thing about him, and I'm the skipper of this boat, the great thing about John is he is just incredibly practical, fantastic in a crisis. We've both been in crisis before, and he's just brilliant in a crisis. He's my size. Funny enough, we were just saying, we've actually spent more time sleeping together than we have with our wives. Which is slightly worrying, being my size. He is not very good looking, but he might get better looking as the weeks go by, so it might be his day. But John is just brilliant, and there are certain, the one story I mentioned about John, it goes back to people asking about going to the loo and everything else. We were doing a mountain in Alaska, and we were going up to high camp, and we were roped together, and John hadn't gone for his Donald before he left, and he shouted out to me, he said, and these are the days, it was a George III, anyway, we're going to work that cocker slang out, so he said, I need a George, and and I said, oh, gosh, well, literally, all about this, minus whatever it was, at about 6,000 meters, so he stepped to one side, he had a George, and then he said, well, I can't get it in my rucksack, so I'm going to lower him down to you. So I couldn't believe it. So not only have I slept with this guy, I actually carried George the rest of the day. What's all that about? Anyway, so that's John. The other guy is a fellow called Mike, one of John's friends, and Mike Wynn. I always say if you're going to get somebody on the boat, make sure they've got a surname called Wynn. But Mike Wynn, a great guy. He is the exact opposite of John. The most impractical person I've ever come across. He's the chief financial officer for Lonro, ex-retired. Spent a lot of his time in Malawi. But he's got a great sense of humour, big rugby player, and he's meticulous in his attention to detail. So I've got a practical guy, a guy who's meticulous in attention to detail, so he will fit in perfectly. And then the final person is a fellow from Helensburgh, Steve Hughes, and Steve is he's our technician. He's another guy like me, ex-army, and he is brilliant on everything to do with communications. He now works for Thales, he's worked for Airbus and everything else, and ex-special forces. As I say, he's gone from special forces to special needs. I think, but when he says that, you're going to be helped on the boat. So there you have it. So there's four of us, and it will be quite interesting. And it is you know, when you think about it, four old men, four naked old men. I mean, just it's shudder the thought. It is like a floating care home. I was thinking, and actually, I was thinking it's like this is the ultimate saga cruise. and you all know what saga stands for, don't you?
Yeah.
Sex annually, generally August. So hopefully we make landfall before July. Otherwise, somebody is going to be living the dream. Anyhow, that is me just linking, in all respects, what I learned in the Scouts 50 odd years ago to what I've been doing in a few weeks' time. And I think that linkage is so important. From the leadership that I learned from the masters like Ronnie and from Alan, and you'll be learning from Ryan and others, really fundamental. The preparation, the be prepared, absolutely fundamental. And then the people that you surround yourself with, really important. And just to finish off, there was a little comment that I had with a lady about last year sometime, and we were talking about people who have had an impact on you. And I said, so who has been the most impactful person that you have known? And this lady, she